Focus point of a day of commemoration at the Steve Biko Centre in Ginsburg in King Williamstown in the Eastern Cape. The Biko Foundation and the Eastern Cape Arts and Culture Department is commemorating the death of the Black Consciousness Movement leader. One issue on the table is youth leadership. For more on this story, we cross to our reporter Busisiwe Jemsana-Mantashe, who's at the Biko Legacy Centre. Good afternoon, Busisiwe. Tell us more.
Afternoon, Nompu. Well, certainly a celebration of a life well lived, but on the same breath, a life short-lived. And the Steve Biko Centre is tasked with making sure that the legacy of the Black consciousness leader, Steve Bantu Biko, is kept alive and is passed on to generations to come. And at the center of that is his son, Nkosinathi Biko, and he joins me now. Puti, thank you so much for your time. Let's first get what this day means to you as a family.
Well, it's 42 years since Steve Biko was murdered, and every year on 12th of September we gather, usually here but sometimes elsewhere around the country, to commemorate and to celebrate his life. This year we've chosen to do that with his community, particularly with young South Africans and members of the community. So as we speak, there is a youth dialogue happening here at the Steve Biko Centre. Later on we will have another dialogue session focusing more on the adult members of the community. And earlier in the day we had a short service and a wreath-laying ceremony back at the graveyard.
And when you talk about youth dialogue, how important is it that the ideals, or in fact, are the ideals that he stood for, the Black consciousness ideology, is it still relevant in this day and age?
I think that nothing has shown us the relevance of Black consciousness than the recent past. I believe that the couple of days that we have emerged from, where we have seen violence against children, young women, violence against foreign nationals, violence against our own citizens. Of the 12 people that died, 10 are South African citizens. This kind of violence against the black body speaks to a vacuum in the place of where our soul should be residing as South Africans. And who else taught us best how to replenish our soul than Steve Biko?
Do you notice that we have a vacuum of leaders, in particular young leaders, who are able to pass that on?
In fact, ironically, I think that the young leaders are doing substantially better than the established leadership. The young leadership is asking tough and serious questions of our nation, whether in the form of roads must fall or various other messages that have been emanating. The latest, of course, is being this focus on the violence against women and children. And I do think that perhaps the death of political structures, particularly youth political structures that are appended to the main political bodies, is something that has left us with at least one less conduit for the development of youth leadership. So we are seeing it now in different formations outside of the political stream. Here we have a young writer, Hosi Chikane, leading the conversation today with students from surrounding schools.
And what has prompted some of these violent scenes that we are seeing, many or some are complaining that there are many illegal foreign nationals in the country, saying that they are taking their jobs. With the ideals that Steve Biko stood for, what do you think his stand would be in this whole debacle?
Well, I think that the argument has been advanced that this has to do with jobs that have been stolen. But you look at the statistic, I mean, it is totally unacceptable that Africans should die on African soil. Foreign nationals should be killed by South Africans on African soil. It is even more despicable that South Africans, 10 out of 12, have died. And I am certain that those South Africans cannot be said to have stolen jobs from other South Africans. The argument doesn't stack up.
And the argument that borders should be opened for a free passage on African countries, what would be the ideal solution to that? Borders open or only legal foreign nationals allowed to come to the country?
I think that there is a case for a united Africa, one where there is free movement of talent, goods and services. But even within the context of such arrangements, such as the European Union, there are of course rules that are about protecting the sovereignty of each country. I do think though that the issues point to a woundedness in our nation. It should never be that in search of material fulfillment, economic opportunity and so forth, that that end can justify the means of killing others.
And lastly, before I let you go, you started off this day the commemoration of the late Steve Biko with a wreath-laying ceremony, and you were saying that it's a bittersweet moment for you as a family, as the murderers of Steve Biko, no one was really held accountable.
Yes, indeed. It has been 42 years. The Biko family is part of an initiative that involves many other families. And the conversation we are bringing forth is about revisiting a number of cases that are the balance of the work of the TRC so that the legal processes can play out. Of course, we recognize that dealing with these issues from a legal point of view is one aspect. I really do think, though, that the ultimate justice is being triumphant over the challenges that led to the activism of Steve Biko and others. That we should not see people live on the margins of our economy and political spaces in the manner that we are seeing. We've got unemployment sitting at what? In excess of 30%. Some say under 40% when you look at the expanded definition. It should not be that we have 17 million South Africans on grants when people are capable of putting in a decent day's work and earning a living. So we have to make our economy one that is accessible, and we have to arm our people with the capacity to perform in the modern economy.
And perhaps the land question would be at the center of trying to redress.
Well, there is no future of equality in South Africa without dealing very frankly with the land question.
Thank you so much for your time. The son of the late Steve Biko, saying that the recent violent scenes that as a country speak to the virtue of the ideals that Steve Bantu Biko stood for, and in fact the black consciousness ideals would be so fitting at this day and time to try and conscientize black Africans to be able to tolerate and live with each other in peace. Those are the things that are happening at the Steve Biko Centre. Currently a dialogue is underway speaking to youth leadership with young people part of the debate. Later on there will be another dialogue that also speaks to issues that young people face now in the country and the challenges that are there and the possible solutions that can be implemented to make sure that the ideals, the legacy and what Steve Biko stood for is not in vain, and that his death was not in vain. Back to you in studio, Nompu.
Thanks very much, Busisiwe, for that. We're going to go for a